If you've been following the news closely, you've probably noticed that since the news story was released that over 1,000 Jews were killed in Israel by a surprise attack by Hamas, that the anti-Palestinian and pro-Jew news propaganda campaigns have gone into full swing. What happened on October 7, 2023, when 1,300 Jews were killed in a surprise attack by Hamas was a horrible act of terrorism. And terrorism has no place in our society. And understandably, we should stand in solidarity with Israel in the face of terror and condemn these acts of evil. What happened in Israel is a horrible act of terrorism and a terrible tragedy. But it does not mitigate the pain, sorrow, and suffering that the Palestinian Arabs have endured by an arrangement put in place by Western nations that has been favorable to the Jews and unfair to the Arabs. However, the media coverage on the attack of Jews by Hamas in Israel is being slanted to meet that very objective. The propaganda campaign to achieve that objective is so extreme that many talking heads in the media are literally saying that anyone now hoping for a peaceful resolution that avoid harming the Palestinians are being wrongly labeled as being anti-Semitic and being supporters of terrorism. It's totally untrue. Case in point, a recent petition has been drafted by a group of Palestinian American college students in Ohio seeking a peaceful resolution in Israel's response to the attack. Many corporation executives have responded by saying that the name of every student who signed the petition should be made public to allow them to know who not to hire in the future. Because they claim that these signers of the petition are supporting terrorism against the Jews. That narrative has become a prevalent one within the mainstream media. You know, most people are totally clueless of how the media shapes and distorts their thoughts and perception of reality. It's in fact amazing how effective the media is at shaping public perceptions and steering our sympathies. Public sympathy is a resource, and the media is used to steer public sympathies in the direction of media controllers. The media shapes public perceptions and opinions. The media tells us who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. The media also tells us which side of an issue to take on any given topic by slanting their reports in a favored direction. The reason why the majority of Americans have always sided in favor of the Jews regarding the conflict shared between them and the Palestinians is a direct result of the fact of the Jewish Americans' monopoly over the mainstream media. It allows them to present a slanted story and distort the media images that are deliberately designed to manipulate the masses to think in ways favorable of the Jews and unfavorable of the Palestinians. This is not the case of a person being anti-Semitic. Nowadays, when anyone formulates any thoughts that are contrary of the narrative set forth by the Jays, they are wrongly labeled as being anti-Semitic. This enables these self-serving narratives to prevail while discouraging anyone else from presenting any questions regarding the legitimacy of their narratives. But we must question the prevailing narratives within the media, because given how strong the anti-Palestinian media propaganda has become, there's a legitimate concern that is being done to create a societal consent for a horrific, disproportionate retaliation against the entire Palestinian people. Furthermore, it's no secret that the Jays were trying to take more land from the Palestinians. The severity of the anti-Palestinian propaganda appears to be a manufactured consent to mistreat propaganda campaign that will meet that objective. Manufactured consent to mistreat is when those within power wants to create a societal consenting for the mistreatment of a targeted population. They use the media to portray the targeted population as being a major problem of society through manufactured false news reports. They vilify them, criminalize them, and dehumanize the targeted population in order to create a consensual national setting that justifies their mistreatment of the targeted population. What manufactured consent to mistreat specifically means is to turn a normal population into a fearsome enemy of society through false, negative, vilifying news media propaganda, then using the false negative perception of the group to falsely justify mistreating them, attacking them, and killing them. Ironically, manufactured consent to mistreat is an old Nazi propaganda warfare tactic that was originally deployed against the Jews by Adolf Hitler's head Nazi propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels, to facilitate the mistreatment of the Jews. To create societal consent for the mistreatment of the Jews, the Nazi falsely portrays them as being a major problem of the German society through manufactured false news report. They vilify, criminalize, and dehumanize the Jays in order to make others insensitive to their plight. This subsequently created a consensual national society, setting that allows them to implement the Holocaust against the Jays. After World War II ended, many of those same social scientists and propagandists that socially engineered a consensual setting that manufactured consent for the treatment of the Jews were given amnesty and relocated to the U.S. in exchange for their knowledge of social science. The program was called Operation Paperclips. The U.S. government has some of the best media social engineering scientists in the world. Their methods used are a combination of the studies dating back to not only those German social scientists, but also to the early years of the Tavistock Institute of Human Behavior in London. Manufactured consent to mistreat is presently the psychological warfare propaganda tactic that's being deployed against Black people by the white society. Here's why they deem it necessary to manufacture consent for the mistreatment of Black people. The success of the 1960s civil rights movement was greatly due to the national and global support that was attained by Dr. King's nonviolent strategies. Once those images of America's Black population being brutalized with fire hoses, police batons, and canine dogs for merely peacefully seeking to be treated with the basic principles of human dignity, once they were aired on America's nightly news, they gained national and global support for the plight of African Americans. The global response and support of African Americans were immense. Dr. King was even awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his nonviolent efforts in pursuit of full equality for African Americans. African Americans were favorably perceived by millions of people around the world as being a dignified people pursuing an equality that we should have been born with. These global responses in support of African Americans totally embarrassed the U.S. government. It also eroded its global image and standing around the world. White oppressive forces realized then that to continue their subjugation and exploitation of Black people as a means of maintaining their social dominance over Black people, it had become necessary to manufacture societal consent to do so. They achieved this by creating media propaganda that portrays Black people as being a major problem of the society. Through lies and manufactured news stories, Black people are being made to look like we are a part of a treacherous, frightening, criminalized fringe, thereby creating a false impression of wanton Black criminality and violence. This creates prejudice, distorted perceptions, and incriminating beliefs about Black people that are designed to make the nation and the entire world insensitive to our plights. These deplorable depictions are intentionally designed to create a shifting of victimization in behalf of whites and to lessen pressure for social change in behalf of Blacks. This is the psychological warfare tactic that white oppressive forces presently deploys against Black people. Black people are being vilified, criminalized, dehumanized in order to create contemptuous and incriminating beliefs about the Black population that are designed to make the nation and the entire world insensitive to our plight. Tranquilize effort on our behalf, and it makes any serious criticism of white racism now almost impossible. When contempt of Black people is made to appear justifiable, this creates conditioned responses within the nation that allows eventualities to unfold against the Black population without opposition or resentment. This is very evident within the U.S. criminal justice system, where in which Black people are disproportionately incarcerated, given stiffer sentences, and are more likely than any other racial group to be treated brutally, beaten, and fired upon by police officers while we're unarmed. This propaganda campaign is the reason why it is possible for white cops to habitually kill unarmed innocent Black people, even when these murders are captured on film and still avoid being indicted by merely saying that they were in fear of losing their lives. Our black skin has been made to appear a weapon. Furthermore, it creates a consensual national setting wherein which witnesses, bystanders, and even world audience would sit by idle, allowing black people to be brutally mistreated under the belief that it's all justified. This propaganda campaign also allowed the white society to use black people as its most ticketed and most fined group that generates revenue to their cities, such as witnessed by the fact that the majority of black people in traffic courts are usually the predominant defendants, even when black people makes up less than 30% of the entire population and within the city. Black people are constant revenue generators for many white majority cities across the nation and even around the world. These injustices are now most often ignored because the perception has collectively become that whatever mistreatment black people endured is justified. The media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and make the guilty innocent. The media has the power to influence our minds, ideas, behaviors, and attitudes of the masses. Malcolm X said that. The white media is also being used to demoralize and rule black people. It's no strange occurrence that many black people are now self-hating, perceive ourselves as being our own worst enemies, and reveres Caucasians in spite of such a brutally horrific history of oppression and discrimination. This mindset and these thoughts among black people that clearly benefits the white society were deliberately indoctrinated into the minds of millions of black people through unrelentingly black racially demoralizing propaganda campaign. The white media's unrelenting negative depiction of black people that amplifies the negative to the point that it distorts our reality is much more than just biased media reporting. It's actually an insidious black racially demoralizing divide and rule psychological warfare campaign. Demoralized divide and rule is a method of maintaining control over a targeted population through constant and unrelenting demoralization in order to create self-hate and division between them. It is a well-proven tactic because when the oppressed are kept demoralized, divided, and made self-loathing, this condition makes them much more easier to control. It also makes the oppressed more compliant with their oppressor's dominance over their lives. In many cases, it will make the oppressed even prefer it. Joseph Goebbels, head of Hitler's chief propagandist, said that demoralize the enemy from within. This is the warfare of the future. Dr. Juice Benloff, a psychoanalyst, says that demoralization of a target audience is the next step in successful mind control. Yuri Bezmenov, a former KGB expert in psychological warfare who defected to the U.S. during the early 1970s, said that whenever those in power want to brainwash a targeted population to think and behave the way that they want them to, they always heavily demoralize them. This divides them, makes them self-loathing, and makes them much more easier to control. This is precisely the psychological warfare that's being deployed against black people by white oppressive forces. Our condition has nothing to do with a silly slave syndrome myth. This psychological warfare system is deployed like a massive media marketing campaign that constantly subjects black people to receiving only the fraudulent and worst narratives about ourselves. The ultimate goal is to demoralize black people to such an extent that we begin to doubt our own ability to govern ourselves. And we begin to believe that we therefore need whites to govern over our lives. Moreover, we begin to believe that we're better off living under white dominance, and therefore we abandon all hopes of liberating ourselves. It also creates black self-hatred and disunity, which attacks the core foundation of what bonds us as a people, and we can then be ruled over forever. This is our hidden reality. This isn't some feeble-minded conspiracy theory. Demoralized divide and rule is precisely the psychological warfare system that is presently being deployed against black people by white oppressive forces. It's the absolute truth of our plight and condition. Moreover, it's a process that is overt and in the open. You can see it with your own eyes. All you have to do is start critically thinking. It's in fact so obvious that it's only by not critically thinking that it cannot be seen. For when critically thinking, can you not see just how cartoonishly unrealistic it actually is that virtually all information that we receive from white sources about ourselves are black racially demoralizing? Come on, wake up. It's a demoralized, divide and rule psychological warfare campaign. The system is deployed like a massive media marketing campaign that constantly subjects Black people to receiving only the fraudulent worst narratives about ourselves. Within this control system, fraudulent Black racially demoralizing propaganda is being pumped unrelentingly into the unsuspecting minds of Black people without being challenged or counterbalanced by an equal amount of Black positive racially affirming information. It conveys a subliminal message that Black people are our own worst enemies and we therefore need whites to govern over our lives. Moreover, that Black people should admire, respect, and trust only whites. This system is extremely effective because when Black people are repetitively presented these noted narratives from trusted white media sources, it can be very difficult to resist its implied subliminal propaganda programming, especially when the propaganda is being told daily and so unrelentingly. Its weapon is the demoralizing message that it carries and the way that it adversely affects the Black population in terms of our behavior. With time being unable to refute the constant negative information being told about ourselves, many Black people eventually comes to accept it. The constant taunting of negative propaganda constantly influence how many Black people perceive ourselves collectively, creating division and self-hatred amongst us. It also turns our collective frustrations and aggressions away from the white society and redirects it towards our own people. Through the skillful, sustained use of repetitive media propaganda, white oppressive forces have literally created a psychological prison for the minds of Black people. The basis of this concept of warfare works by affecting the subconscious minds of the Black population through demoralizing propaganda. It works by tapping into the immense power that shame has upon the human mind to mentally enslave Black people. Those Black people who don't critically think never notices their mental change. This is our hidden reality that we must wake up to. This is all possible because people are like computers. All you have to do is keep giving them certain information every so often, and you can steer an entire generation towards an implied subliminal objective. It doesn't matter if the information presented is untrue. Most Black people will act accordingly upon the information because they've all been given the same disinformation about ourselves. Not all wars are fought on a battlefield. Most are fought in the mind. This psychological warfare system provides the white society with a more proficient method for controlling Black people and subduing Black protests. For unlike the past blatant racist system that Black people were easily able to identify and therefore develop counter strategies against, this system is not easily recognized nor easily comprehended by most of their Black victims. This psychological warfare program works so well, in fact, that it not only makes Black people more compliant with white dominance over our lives, it in fact makes many Black people even prefer white dominance over our lives. It is at the root of both the profound feelings of self-hatred now afflicting many Black people, and it is at the heart of the internalized false feeling of superiority that many whites possess. This is our hidden reality. Welcome to the real world. The oppressor's depiction of the oppressed is never a true one. It's always a false negative depiction that serves the nefarious hidden agendas of the oppressors. This is a fact that has been a consistent truth throughout human history and is still especially true now in regards to Black people living under white oppression. Sadly, to our own detriment, the oppressed will always believe the fraudulent worst about themselves. Frantz Fanon said that. This isn't some feeble-minded premise, nor is it a silly conspiracy theory. It's the truth that they hide from you. Media social engineering is a real, covert, very well-crafted system of control that allows the white ruling class to control the masses and targeted population. Furthermore, throughout Western history, those empires that were brutally oppressive throughout history, fearing eventual retribution from the oppressed, have always developed methods for manipulating the minds of the oppressed to think in ways that prevents them from seeking retribution. This is our hidden reality. We must elevate our minds above a biblical fairy tale and a silly slave syndrome myth, and we must learn the reality. Because if our understandings remains flawed, then all of our liberating remedies that stem from those misunderstandings will also be flawed. We must recognize that the white society deploys social sciences against us. We must learn them and develop counter strategies. Welcome to the real world. The white society uses the media against black people. They weaponize it against black people. One love and peace.